This is the third book in the series on Wexford history. Famous Wexford people in history was followed last year by Fascinating Wexford History Volume 1. And now, for 2020, I would like to introduce Volume 2. I hope that I'm making history more accessible. These books are not academic works, but rather stories that bring history to life. Like the story of the 6 Wexford people who sailed on the Titanic. 4 drowned and 2 survived the tragedy in 1912. The chief purser, Hugh McElroy, seen here on the left posing with Captain Smith before sailing out of Cove, was born to Wexford parents in Liverpool. Before transferring to the White Star Line's newly built Titanic, Hugh worked as assistant purser with the Allen Steamship Company on the advice of his friend John Ennis, the company's passenger manager. When John retired, he returned to his family farm at Springwood, near Ballymitty on the New Line Road outside Wexford town. Also on board were 26-year-old Lizzie Doyle from Bree and her cousin Robert Myrna from Ballywilliam. Both went down with the ship. Another Wexford native who perished was Larry Doyle, a stoker who worked in the boiler room. Two Wexford men who survived were George McGough, an able seaman from Duncannon, and John O'Connor from Coolcots in Wexford town. There were 120 Irish on board the Titanic. 42 of them survived, and of the 1,500 who died, 78 were from Ireland, including those 6 from Wexford. Staying on a nautical theme, but going back another 150 years, the book opens with an episode of piracy on the high seas in 1765. A ship was carrying a small fortune in Spanish gold and silver from the Canary Islands to England. The crew included an Irishman, 2 Englishmen, and a Dutchman. The 4 mutinied, killing all 8 on board, including the captain, and landed in what is now known as Dollar Bay on the Hook Peninsula. There they hid most of their booty in the sand, but it was later discovered by the authorities from New Ross. The 4 mutineers made their way to Dublin, where they were arrested. All 4 stood trial the following year and were publicly hanged at St. Stephen's Green. Their bodies were left hanging from chains for months at different locations in the city as a warning to others. For years after, people searched the shoreline along the Hook Peninsula for any possible remaining dollars. One of the most extraordinary stories in the book is from exactly 100 years ago, at the height of the War of Independence. This was the assassination in Gorey of an RIC district inspector named Percival Lee Wilson. He had been accused of mistreating and humiliating the 1916 rebels in Dublin 4 years earlier, following their surrender. Michael Collins was among those who vowed vengeance, saying Lee Wilson was a marked man. Collins' hit squad made their move in June 1920 when they shot Lee Wilson dead as he walked along the Ballycanoe Road towards his home. His Cork-born widow Mary, on a trip to Edinburgh in 1924, paid £8 for a large 18th century religious painting at an auction house in the city and had it sent home to her house in Dublin. 10 years later, she donated the painting to the Jesuits in Leeson Street, who had helped her through her grieving for her dead husband. In 1990, the painting was sent to the National Gallery to be cleaned and restored. It was discovered that the picture had been mistakenly attributed to a Dutch artist. Instead, it was confirmed to be an original by the Italian master Caravaggio, and was indeed his long-lost painting, The Taking of Christ. The masterpiece now hangs in the gallery and is valued at over a staggering €100 million. The forgotten sinking of the Rosslare to Fishguard ferry in World War II is recorded in some detail. It was twice attacked by German warplanes. In the first, a Wexford town native, Mosey Brennan, died from his injuries. In the second attack a year later, his 17-year-old son John, the captain who was originally from Arthurstown, and 28 others lost their lives. Other fascinating accounts include the visit in 1845 by the legendary escaped black slave and civil rights campaigner Frederick Douglass to the Assembly Rooms, now Wexford Arts Centre. There is also the story of the Duncormac-born soldier Thomas Fitzpatrick, who was the famous Angel of Mons, an exorcism in Killinick that caused the death of a child, the first ever Anglo-Irish treaty signed at Salskar Abbey in the 12th century, and the shooting of the movie Saving Private Ryan on Ballinesker Beach in 1997 is covered in some detail. The story of the workhouses, the Wexford baker who was hanged, drawn and quartered, the story of Enniscorthy native Thomas Wafer, who was shot dead on Sackville Street in 1916, but whose body was never recovered. The stories behind the Ross tapestries in New Ross, the lost town of Carrick, witchcraft and hauntings, and a visit from the devil himself. The Irish slave labourers who lost their lives in a Nazi concentration camp, including Patrick Breen from Wexford town, and of course murders and subsequent hangings, including the farmer found murdered on the morning of his wedding. All in all, a heady brew bringing local Wexford history to life. A year's research has gone into producing this, my third book. I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed putting it together. It's now available in bookshops throughout County Wexford, as well as online from Amazon for those living abroad.